From our Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar was killed on Wednesday in Gaza. Israel says it has identified his body through DNA. Sinwar was appointed the head of Hamas after Israel assassinated the group's previous leader, Ismail Haniyeh, in Iran in August. Israel accused Sinwar of being the mastermind of the attacks on Israel on October 7, 2023. Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, calls Sinwar the embodiment of evil. Daniel Levy, a former Israeli peace negotiator, on the other hand, criticized the celebration of Sinwar's death in Israel. He said there is an Israeli Western obsession that you remove the leader, that you cut off the head of the snake, and then the issue is dealt with. Resistance is a function of the oppressive conditions and denial of rights under which people are kept. A colonial mindset cannot understand that, Levy told Al Jazeera. Levy currently heads the Middle East and North Africa program of the European Council on Foreign Relations. The Washington Post, reporting from Ramallah, quoted a senior commander in the Jenin battalion in the West Bank, saying that if the news about the martyrdom of Sinwar is true, he has fulfilled his biggest dream of gaining martyrdom. The commander said Sinwar humiliated the occupiers and the senior Zionist leaders since October 7th until now. Several members of the UN Security Council on Wednesday denounced Israel's blockade on humanitarian aid into Gaza, causing mass starvation among already suffering civilians. The Security Council members convened to discuss the situation in Palestine after it was requested by the Algerian mission to the UN. Algerian ambassador to the UN, Amar Benjama, described the suffering of people in Gaza as beyond imagination and said that the sadistic impulses of those responsible within the Israeli authorities knows no bounds when it comes to inflicting torment, inflicting punishment upon the Palestinian civilians. Stressing that civilians must not be a target, he recalled that civilians are protected by international law and that Israel must fulfill its obligations. The starvation of civilians as a method of war is explicitly prohibited under international law, he stressed. Russian envoy Vasily Nebenzia also expressed concerns over Israel's so-called general's plan that aims for humanitarian blockade and squeezing people out from these territories. Nebenzia also denounced the U.S. decision to pump its Middle Eastern ally, or Israel, full of weapons and claimed that the U.S. is providing political cover and blocking any Security Council attempts to end Israel's ruthless military machine. He said that the Security Council has levers and necessary tools to be used. The Nation has published a study revealing the glaring double standard for American corporate media coverage of Israel's war on Gaza and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The study focused on the first 100 days of each conflict, analyzing commentary, editorial priorities, and reporting by CNN and MSNBC. They found that on the two networks, Palestinians in Gaza received far less sympathetic and humanizing coverage than either Israelis during the same period or Ukrainians during the first 100 days after Russia's invasion. The analysis was conducted by media critic Adam Johnson and researcher and data analyst Othman Ali. They said the point of this analysis is not that U.S. media should reduce its coverage of the tragedies in Ukraine to achieve parity with Gaza, but that it should elevate its coverage of the suffering in Gaza to be comparable to that of Ukraine with the same urgent and moralizing tone. Johnson and Ali found that on CNN and MSNBC, emotive words such as brutal, massacre, slaughter, barbaric, and savage were overwhelmingly used to describe the killing of Israelis and Ukrainians and almost never used to describe the killing of Palestinians. The two networks also covered the impact of Russia's invasion on civilians twice as often as they did the impact of Israel's bombing and siege of Gaza on civilians, despite the latter having a toll 5 times that of the former. As well, on CNN and MSNBC, the words war crime or genocide were mentioned over 17 times more in the context of Ukraine than they were in the context of Gaza. The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, is urging the Biden administration to demand Israel halt attacks on the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. This is after Israel killed an American family in repeated airstrikes. A Palestinian-American man from Virginia, who was not identified, informed CAIR that his family's home was bombed on Monday in Israel's attack. The house in the camp reportedly had 15 people in it at the time, including 7 children. Among them was the man's mother, who is a permanent resident of the United States. After an initial strike, the mother and several family members were injured and alive, but trapped beneath the rubble. CARE says the family had reportedly contacted Israeli authorities with the location and GPS coordinates of the house to facilitate the safe passage of an ambulance. Despite this information, the Israeli military allegedly bombed the home a second time. Israel also reportedly targeted the ambulance that arrived to help the survivors, killing one of the doctors and several children. Only a 7-year-old boy survived the attack. Israel has killed more than 42,000 Palestinians in Gaza and displaced nearly the entire population of over 2 million people during the last year. In July, a report in the British medical journal The Lancet estimated that the death toll from Israel's war on Gaza may be as high as 186,000. Biden officials who quit over Israel's war on Gaza launch effort for a new policy in the Middle East. Details after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. 2 Biden administration officials who resigned in protest over federal policy on Israel and Gaza have launched an advocacy effort seeking to change U.S. policy in the Middle East. Co-founders Josh Paul and Tariq Habash announced the creation of their lobbying group and political action committee, a new policy PAC, on Wednesday. They say their project aims to better represent the majority of Americans who disagree with the government's approach to Israel-Palestine, as well as the broader Middle East. Paul spent 11 years as Director of Congressional and Public Affairs for the State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs. He resigned last October. Habash, a Palestinian-American who served as advisor in the Education Department's Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development, left his post in January. In a statement, they said that U.S. policy toward Israel and Palestine should advance American national security and foreign policy interests in the Middle East. As well, it should ensure freedom, equality, and human rights of all peoples and comply with American and international law. Additionally, it says a new policy PAC will work to oppose laws or policies that repress free speech, to prevent accountability, and to limit Americans' abilities to exercise their constitutional freedoms. Columbia University has temporarily barred pro-Israel professor Shai Davidai from its New York campus on accusations of harassment and intimidation directed at other employees. Davidai teaches at Columbia Business School. A university spokesperson said that while Columbia has consistently respected Davidai's right to free speech, it does not tolerate threats of intimidation, harassment, or other threatening behavior by its employees. The spokesperson also said Davidai has repeatedly harassed and intimidated Columbia University employees in violation of the school's policy. Davidai has filmed student activists and university officials on campus, accusing them of supporting pro-Hamas sentiments and questioning the actions permitted by the university, according to media outlet The Hill. On the anniversary of Hamas's attacks on Israel last week, Davidai posted a video in which he followed Cass Holloway, the university's chief operating officer, asking why pro-Palestinian protests were being allowed on campus. Columbia University became a locus of free Palestine activism last year, which sparked nationwide demonstrations that made headlines in the wake of Israel's war on Gaza. Protesters demanded an end to the attacks and the university's divestment from Israeli companies. The White House says reports of Israeli soldiers in Gaza regularly using civilians as human shields is incredibly disturbing, adding that there can be no justification for such actions. This was reported in the New York Times on Monday. The Israeli army has denied the accusation. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller told reporters if the accusations are true, they would violate both international law and the Israeli army's own code of conduct. He said that it is entirely appropriate for Israelis to investigate the claims and called for accountability if the investigations confirm the violations. Miller also urged the Israeli army to take steps to prevent such practices from occurring in the future. A 28-year-old woman has been arrested for allegedly vandalizing the Islamic Society of Greater Philadelphia on Sunday night. She is facing charges of institutional vandalism, trespass, desecration of objects, and harassment. Philadelphia police say she ripped apart copies of the Quran, broke the front door window with a cane, and refused to leave after the attack. The woman has been identified as Sarah Khattab. Her bail has been set at $25,000. For the second time in 24 hours, Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney has struck down a controversial Georgia election rule. It would have required poll workers to conduct a hand count of all votes to ensure the tally matched that of electronic voting machines. The hand count rule was set to go into effect on October 22nd, a week after early voting had already started in Georgia. McBurney said the hand count rule was too much too late to add to the 2024 election process, but said he would still weigh the merits of the proposal for future elections. It was proposed by allies of Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump. Georgia State Senator Nabila Islam Parks called the rule chaotic and denounced the state's Republican Governor Brian Kemp for failing to investigate the Trump-aligned election board members who pushed for the ordinance. Amanda Carpenter of the nonprofit advocacy group Protect Democracy said demands for hand counts are typically based on baseless conspiracies about voting machines and intended to disrupt the voting process. Democratic presidential candidate Vice President Kamala Harris visited a Black-owned art gallery in Detroit, Michigan on Tuesday as part of her outreach to Black male voters. The visit marked the unveiling of her Opportunity Agenda for Black Men, which aims to offer new economic advantages. Harris's focus on Black male voters has sharpened in recent weeks, with former President Barack Obama joining her on the campaign trail. Speaking in Pittsburgh, Obama addressed the importance of Black male voters and acknowledged some resistance within the group, saying some just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. The campaign is not overly concerned about a major shift of Black male voters to the Republican camp, but is wary of voter apathy, which could lower turnout. Qatar said on Wednesday that it will not allow any attacks from the Al Udeid Air Base, which hosts the largest U.S. military facility in the Middle East, against any other country. Qatar hosts about 13,000 U.S. troops at the base. Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman said in an interview with Qatar TV, the relationship with the United States is a strategic partnership characterized by cooperation on multiple levels, while emphasizing that each party enjoys full sovereignty and neither interferes in the affairs of the other. Regarding efforts to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza, the Qatari premier said, for more than a year we have been mediating in the Gaza file, but unfortunately the agreement requires two parties. Iran is on high alert in anticipation of an Israeli military response to the October 1st missile attack by Tehran. This was in retaliation for Israel's assassinations of Hezbollah and Hamas leaders and Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders. Israel expanded the conflict on October 1st by launching an incursion into southern Lebanon. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for watching Muslim News. We are a community channel dedicated to bringing you stories you can trust. Please like, share, and subscribe to our content. You can also comment to let us know what you think of our coverage. You can donate now by visiting muslimnetwork.tv/donate. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV. Salam.